If you've experienced anything paranormal / out of this world, what was it? Edit, this was given a helpful award and I don't know how to feel about that right before one of my wheelchair-bound residents died. He was up and walking, swearing up and down his wife was on her way to get him. For about 2 hours, he kept crawling out of bed, insisting he needed to get ready for her arrival. His wife had passed a few years earlier. After some coaxing, we finally got him into bed. As we were in the room, he looks over to the empty doorway and announced that she was here. He quickly became unresponsive and died not long after. That is an interesting story. We learned in nursing school that occurrences like this are not necessarily uncommon for people who are on death's door. Hallucinations like this are actually a sign that the family may need to be notified to come in and see the person before they die. When I was a kid, our dog went missing one night. It was already dark and a storm was coming. My parents decided we would grab some flashlights and go look for him. We drove down the road and parked off the side and just started calling his name. My sister and I walked into a big field and a lady just appeared out of nowhere. She had a dress on and she was holding an old lantern. She asked us what we were doing. We told we were looking for our dog. She told us to get off her property. We started to walk away and she just disappeared right in front of us. My sister and I knew we saw a ghost. We found out later that field we were in was an old graveyard. Most of the tombstones were knocked over or broken. To this day, nobody believes us. We know what we saw that night. Heard someone knocking from the other side of the door in a room in our house. Have a video recording of it too. It's weird. No pipes or anything around there. Never happened again either. Also saw a wee boy with blonde hair run past my office window in August 2019. And then August 2020. Not 2021 though, embarrassed smiley face. The second time I tracked him with my eyes for a few seconds and ran outside to find nothing. I don't really believe in ghosts but these were really interesting. My brother and I, age 12 and 9, were in sleeping bags in a spare guest room of my aunt's. She had just moved in and we were there to help unpack. It was well into the night so we were asleep in the dark room. My eyes shot open because something was in the room. I didn't see it, but it felt like something was standing between my brother and I. Before I could think what I should do next, it started shouting down at us. Guttural gibberish. Loud and angry. I start screaming my head off. My aunt bursts in and yells what's going on and my only response is to scream turn on the fucking light. Nothing was there. It was quiet. My brother was curled up in a ball at the bottom of his sleeping bag. We went back to sleep, trying to convince myself that my brother had talked in his sleep or something. We never talk about it again. Fast forward. My brother is about leave for Marine boot camp, having a beer and just chatting. He asks me if he can bring up a random thing that's always bugged him, and proceeds to tell his memory of that night. According to him, having heard my version, describes waking up to me screaming and something that seemed to be floating above us yelling at us in some weird language he had never heard before. Said he just wanted to get that off his chest before going off to war. Well, fuck is pretty much the only thing I could respond with. My sister-in-law was brutally murdered by several men, over a year later. After all the trials, I was alone in my in-laws' house, waiting to meet my wife getting home from work. I was sitting on the couch watching TV, my right arm draped on the back of the couch. Suddenly, quietly, I heard my name whispered in my ear. It was my sister-in-law's voice. It was clear as a bell. For a few moments I sat looking to the right where she would have been sitting in order to whisper in my ear. Then I got up, turned off the TV and waited for my wife on the front porch. Years ago, I honestly forget how many, I had a bad breakup from a long-term relationship. I rented this half of a duplex that about half was still under construction, but it was available so I kinda didn't care at the time. I was reading in bed one night upstairs, not too late, like 9 to 10 p.m. when all of a sudden it sounded like someone stomping up the stairs, but it stopped like third step down from the top. I'm freaked out, the cats are freaked out, and we're just staring at the top of the stairs, but there is no one there. A million thoughts are racing through my mind. I'm just kind of frozen, not sure what to do. Finally I form a semi-coherent thought and say, whoever you are, you're not welcome here. Move on. Then I heard heavy steps going down the stairs, not stomping, but could still tell not happy. After a few I went down to double check the door was locked just in case, which it was with a slide bolt no less. I would like to say that's the only time it happened, but it happened about 4 more times in the 2 months I was there. I was evicted because the duplex was deemed unsafe living conditions. My son has an imaginary dog called Banjo. The creepy thing is that Banjo was the name of our family dog a long time ago when I was still a preteen. We lived on a farm close to a river. One day there was a flash flood and my brother was trapped on a rocky hill with raging flooding river all around him and farm animals could be seen being swept away by the current. Our dog Banjo unfortunately jumped in the river to save my brother but got carried away by the current and we never saw him again. After 11 hours the water was safe enough for a boat to collect my brother and he was beside himself with sadness over what happened to Banjo. My brother sadly died after being hit by a car while cycling 2 years later when he was 13. I never told my son about Banjo. So I was very shocked when he began interacting with this invisible dog called Banjo. Is it just coincidence? Or is it the spirit of my long dead brother or the spirit of the long dead Banjo who is visiting my new family? At my grandma's house, cabinet doors open then slam shut. You can hear voices of people who aren't there. A grave behind the house glows green at night. Others have experienced other stuff. But that's all I can say I've experienced directly. 1975-ish. I was living with my great-grandmother and grandmother. My grandma was just a big kid and my BFF. We shared a room in their home. One night, we were awakened by my great-grandmother talking in her sleep. We decided to sneak to her room and listen. As we stepped quietly in her room, she bolted upright and yelled at us. "You made him leave." She was angry, very out of character for her. And here's the paranormal part. There was a butt print on top of the covers, like when you sit on the edge of the bed. She remembered it the next day and was still mad. Mine isn't creepy or anything. I was in France and had been heavily drinking. I was so drunk I fell asleep on the tram home and my stop is second to last on the route. When my stop came I was still asleep and I felt very clearly a hand grab my jacket from the back and pick me up off my feet. As soon as my feet hit the ground I woke up and felt stone cold sober. I looked around and there was no one in the tram from end to end. I stepped off the tram to see if maybe it had been someone who walked off the tram during my momentary confusion. There was no one. When I came home my stepdad asked me if his buddy had helped me home. I was confused and he said his buddy was dead but he could still talk to him and told him to go check on me. He said all this to me before I had a chance to tell him. Why do I always read stuff like this when I'm getting ready for bed? Not a ghost story per se, but it was definitely something that I can't explain. To paint the picture, it was about 1999. I was a sophomore in high school. I was supposed to hang out with my best friend Mark who was a junior one day. He had a car, so the plan was for him to come by the house and pick me up. His dad was an exec for Boeing and had been up in Canada for work for about a month on a project. I paged him, waited a bit, but didn't get an answer. I called from our kitchen phone to his house and his mom answered the call. I asked if he was home and she replied that he wasn't. And to try paging him, I told her that I had and that I hadn't heard from him yet. She was fairly dismissive and said something to the effect of, "I'm sure he's just out getting gas or something. I'm sure you'll hear from him soon." The moment I hung up the phone with her, I turned to my mom who was also in the kitchen with me and said to her matter of fact, "Mark's dad died." My mom gasped and said, "What? What do you mean?" What did she say? I just replied, "I don't think she knows yet." She yelled at me and said, "You don't know that stuff. Quit saying things like that." And I just replied, No, he's dead." She didn't respond to me, but left the kitchen. A couple of hours later, the doorbell rings. I answer it and it's Mark. He's got tears in his eyes, looks at me and says, "My dad's dead." I just responded with, "I know." And we hugged while he cried. I've thought about that moment for the last 20 plus years. I'm a sane, rational person, but I have no explanation for it. The family didn't get the call about his passing until after we spoke. I just somehow knew that he was gone. I wasn't sad. I didn't feel anything. My mom and I never spoke about it or asked me how I knew before everyone else. In case anyone was curious, he died in a car accident up in Canada. I was never really a believer in these things until I had a few experiences as a teenager, but I was always intrigued by the idea of the paranormal. When I was a junior in high school, my homegirl and I met this new kid who was into the occult. One day after school we decided to come with him to this native garden area behind the local park. He was holding some sort of ritual and we wanted to witness it. He formed a star in the sand with wood, sticks and lit it on fire. Before he could actually start his incantations or whatever, we heard a fire truck making its way over. So we put out the fire and ran down the back roads back into the park. On our way, we could hear coyotes howling and the wind picked up out of nowhere. Back at the park, we saw the firefighters pull in, and a single coyote ran past. We chalked it up to coincidence and hung out a few more hours. It was dark now, and we were gonna split to go home. This kid and his GF went their own way, and my homegirl and I called each other and were going to stay on the phone until we both got home. We walked in opposite directions on this road, made it about 200 feet away from each other when a demonic voice came through the phone. We both stopped talking and turned around to look at each other on opposite ends of this road. I asked her if she was fucking with me. She asked the same, and we heard it again. It was scary AF. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I ran back to her and walked her home instead. Over the next few months, a string of unexplainable things happened. We didn't tell many people about it because we didn't want them to think we were crazy. We did some cleansing ritual, and things still happened every here and there but eventually tapered off. That was a weird year. She and I still talk about it when I visit home during the holidays. It wasn't exactly me that experienced this. When I was younger I had a cousin that got kidnapped and killed when she was 7. My aunt, my dad's sister, and uncle lived close to us but ended up moving to a different town because it was too hard to stay in the house after their daughter died. My dad is a carpet cleaner and happened to be hired by the new people that moved into my aunt and uncle's old house. They were telling him how stuff moved in the house and at night they could hear footsteps up and down the hall and a little girl giggling. My dad was so creeped out he left as soon as he could. 1. My mom and I heard a woman's voice call out my name too. My friend and I saw a shadow person while running outside. We turned around mid-run and saw this massive shadow man with no face or any details. Looked like a 7-foot dude in a black morph suit coming right at us. 3. Different friend and I heard something growl at me from a room in my home. Didn't think he heard it until I turned around and he asked if I heard it. 4. Heard another growl while with a friend's dog and the dog was barking at something. Nobody in my family really believes in anything supernatural, however I either wasn't born yet or in a bouncer, so 35 plus years ago. My brother was maybe 4 or 5 and playing in the classic red/yellow little car that was huge in the 80s. My dad was not home and my mother was in the kitchen with a big archway. We had a very large wooden table with a leaf and 2 full benches in the dining room, very heavy. My mom still to this day swears on that day she was washing dishes and turned around and the table with the benches was barricading the archway. No sound or noise. She thought my dad was messing with her and put it back. He then came home and was in the basement and thought she was crazy. She then went back to washing and it barricaded again. She yelled for him and after they put everything back she refused to go back in the kitchen and nothing ever happened again, but it's still unexplained. We are talking a 300 pounds plus table plus 2 3-person benches. The only other thing I remember hearing was my gram a few days before she died said she felt a pat on her butt in bed, which my grandfather used to do. My cousin thought it was him telling her it's okay and to let go and go heaven. I'm atheist. However, it was odd to me just the same. When I was about 12-13 I had a friend spend the night. We spent a good part of the night watching YouTube and telling scary stories before I offered to go make us some popcorn and some sweet tea. It's the South. A must-have. My house was relatively small and the kitchen was conjoined with the dining room. My grandmother kept a large china plate display in the dining room and through it you could see the entire kitchen reflected in it. While I was pouring our tea I glanced over at it and in the reflection standing behind me, which didn't make sense, as my grandmother kept her folded up treadmill in that spot, was the tallest woman I've ever seen with long black hair to match. No face. Scared me so bad my legs gave out and I screamed my friend's name. The house was dead silent. My dog didn't even come, so I scooped up the tea and popcorn and scrambled back to the bedroom. When I got in there I was angry she hadn't answered when I'd called out for her. I had a small house and there was no way she didn't hear me, but she swore up and down that she didn't and was confused. When I explained what had happened and described the scary figure in the reflection she broke down. I'm talking sobbing, and kept saying it follows me everywhere. Needless to say the subject was dropped and I didn't invite her back over. Never seen such a clear reflection like that since and I'm just glad it went back home with her. Whatever it was. Edit, corrected some spelling errors. Heard a voice whisper, but loudly and sharply, my name in the middle of the night while I was unable to fall asleep in my mom's cabin the first time I visited. Back in high school, I am and have always been an insomniac. One night thought, I couldn't sleep. There was this strange light shining in my room. I couldn't figure out where the hell it was coming from. I stood on my bed and put my hand up to see if it blocked the light. It was just a white circle, and it didn't. I laid in bed and I was creeped out cause I literally heard little kids giggling outside at like 3 a.m. I was creeped the fuck out. I stayed up, and my grandpa would go to work very early like at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. Open our fence, close it and go to work. I watched him from my window as he left, and after he left I was finally able to go to sleep. He had a heart attack at work that day and passed away. I get this is paranormal, but I have no other explanation. I used to live in a small studio apartment. I had just gotten home and was about to change, wash up and go back out to meet some friends. I was a bit hungry so I put some bread in the toaster and while it cooked I went into the bathroom to wash my face etc. While in the bathroom I heard the toaster pop. Finished cleaning myself up and went to get the toast, only it was nowhere to be found. Toaster was still hot, but the toast was literally nowhere to be found. I have no idea where it could have gone. This was probably 15 years ago and I still think about it a lot lol. I took care of my mom at the end of her life, which was about a 2-year process from dementia-related illness. Obviously, it was heartbreaking. After her passing a month or so later, my son and I were at Olive Garden and was seated with my back turned to other guests passing by. During our meal, a woman being pushed in a wheelchair hit my chair so hard I was startled. I turned around and I swear to everyone I was looking eye to eye with my mom. The lady did not say anything. My son and I were so confused that we sat there with our mouths hanging open. My mom had passed away on my son's birthday just a month before. There was absolutely no reason this wheelchair should be close to my chair. When we were leaving I went up to the 2 ladies with the wheelchair lady to look closer and I felt the same. She still did not say anything. I took it that God knew I needed to know she was okay. My mom loved Olive Garden and would wrap the breadsticks and put them in her purse. I was looking at our pool from our deck and saw faint flashing 3 or 4 times from just over our neighbor's fence which was behind the pool. A few seconds later I saw a misty sheet looking thing move along the back of the pool. The next morning our neighbor passed away. Saw a full-bodied apparition back in 2006 in a local cemetery. Most terrifying moment of my life. Long story short, Back in 2006, my mother had a dream late one night where this dark, menacing voice spoke from the shadows saying, "Rick, I know what you did, Rick. I'll get you." Forward 9 years later, our upstairs neighbor Rick has a motorcycle accident killing him. Turns out he had a bad break causing him to slide into the intersection, hitting a car and killing him. After spending some time with his son, he tells me the story he's heard on why they left Puerto Rico. Supposedly Rick had set his brother up in their gang and got him killed, left PR and came to America to avoid the heat. Looks like his brother may have had a little bit of revenge from beyond the grave. Years ago, when I was working on my undergrad, I worked at a university. It was close to Christmas and very few people were on campus still working. I was working in the evening in the library when an elderly man, wearing a red coat and has a white beard, says to me, "Hi dear, would you mind helping an old man figure out how to take some classes?" I told him who to talk to, what steps to take, and that seniors are able to take courses for free. He thanked me for my kindness, wished me a Merry Christmas, and very slowly left out the main doors. One of my coworkers was in an office and I joked to her, "I swear I just helped Santa." As we spoke, another coworker walked in from outside and said, "I think I just passed Santa outside." My coworker said, "Well, now I want to see him." We went to see where he went and there was only one set of footprints in the snow from my coworker who just came inside. His was nowhere to be found. Though I don't actually think this is Santa, the three of us did find it odd, and around Christmas we will bring it up with each other. I also love to share this story with my niece and nephews around this time of the year, especially when their belief runs thin. In the home I lived in from when I was about 13 to 18, there would be an apparition of a child. It was always shadow-like and you couldn't make out details other than it being about 4 feet tall with piercing white eyes. This spirit would loom over me when I would try to sleep, just watching me, never moving. Or it would be in the corner of the room, watching me from there. It would also watch me in the bathroom through the mirror. It was mainly in the bedroom and bathroom, but sometimes it would spawn downstairs in the living room or kitchen. It would like running around back and forth between these rooms, not so much standing around like it would in the upstairs bedroom and bathroom. This went on almost daily for the years I lived in that house with my family. I didn't tell them about it since I had severe depression at the time and I didn't want them to think of me any worse than they already did. When I was 18-19 we moved out of that house. As we were moving I playfully said to my mom how the new place will be better since I got weird vibes from that house. She asked what it meant and I said that the house was probably haunted. Her eyes got wide and she pulled me aside and said that she, my sister, and my dad have also seen a ghost in the house. She described the same apparition that I saw. And the thing is, we never spoke about it to each other. It was so unsettling to hear her, my dad, and my sister describe the ghost all with the same description and actions. When I was around 11 years old I woke up in the middle of the night because the dogs in the neighborhood were barking and howling like crazy. I got up to look out my bedroom window and I saw cows. There were at least 50 of them all spread out over the field next to our house and on the main and side street, just lazily walking around. So I go get my mom who had fallen asleep in our room to come look. In the short time it took me to get my mom to look out the window, the cows were gone. And you could hear how the dogs on the main street had stopped howling and the ones on the side street started up. Now the area where we lived wasn't heavily populated at the time and there were a number of people that had cows but not that many, and these were different. They were really big and brown with humps on their backs. According to my mom there weren't any cows like that where we lived. And the side street was very narrow, so even if they did suddenly ran you would still see some going down the street. Paranormal for 11-year-old me, but maybe someone's cows just escaped. My whole family has weird stories. My cousin used to see shadow people walking around their house. My grandpa also saw and heard weird shit when he was in the military and had to do night shifts. Not my story but my mom's. My grandfather was a very kind and gentle man. When he got Alzheimer's it was devastating. He lived abroad with my grandmother, and so she could help out more my mom brought them back to our country. Unfortunately the hospital she admitted him to wasn't run well and he got extremely sick very quickly. He turned into a walking skeleton. She blamed herself for his decline and death. It's important to mention she hadn't had dreams she could remember since she was a child. She's atheist and doesn't believe in ghosts. A week after his death she had a vivid dream. She said everything was warm and smelled like vanilla. She saw her father stood in front of her bathed in light. He didn't say anything, he just smiled. When she woke up she said she could still smell vanilla. She says she thinks he was telling her he was okay and it wasn't her fault.